She used to wear it every day, that perfume with hints of bergamot and vanilla. It was subtle, never loud, never needy, just like her, or at least how I thought she was. It clung to her scarf when she left for work, drifted off her pillow. When I changed the sheets, it had become a part of her, of us. But lately, the scent was gone. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was just used to it, I told myself. Maybe my senses had dulled with time. But then I saw the bottle, untouched, dust gathering at the rim. A bottle that had once emptied too quickly now sat still, ignored, like a book no longer worth reading. Something shifted in me too. Something quiet. A hum in the background of our days. She came home late again. Said it was a quiet dinner. Her smile was there, but it didn't touch her eyes. Her voice was practiced, polished, almost rehearsed. The kind you use in interviews or when lying to someone who trusts you too much. I nodded. I said, "Sounds like it went well." I even kissed her cheek. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. That night, I lay in bed long after she had drifted off, her back to me. She mumbled something in her sleep, not my name. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the ceiling fan click like a metronome, marking the rhythm of doubt. And then, as if moved by a ghost in my ribs, I reached for her phone on the nightstand. I didn't mean to. I swear I did it, but my hands moved before I could ask them to stop. Her passcode was the same, my birthday. How cruel. How absurd. There she was, Sophia. The name hit me like cold water. Her ex, the one she had promised was out of her life. Blocked. Done. Old chapter. The one she said had broken her so badly she feared love itself. I read the messages slowly, carefully, like walking barefoot over broken glass. I miss you too. That night still haunts me. She doesn't know. My heart didn't shatter. It folded in on itself, quiet, like paper burning from the inside. I wanted to scream, to shake her awake, to throw the phone across the room, but I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just sat there, the screen's pale light casting shadows across her sleeping face. She looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos she left behind in me. I set the phone down. I got up. I washed my face in cold water, staring at my reflection. I looked like someone else, someone hollow, someone used to disappointment. I had become unrecognizable in the effort of loving her, but I didn't say anything. Not that night. Not the next morning. Loyalty makes you quiet. And silence. Silence becomes your prison. I wanted her to tell me. I wanted to see how far she'd go. Would she look me in the eye and lie? Would she say she loved only me while writing love letters to the woman who left her? I watched her closely after that, how her voice softened when she got a text. How she pulled her phone closer to her body. How she stopped reaching for me at night. How her laugh changed. It used to sound like surprise. Now it sounded like memory. Every gesture became suspicious. Every word a potential wound. I didn't ask where she was going. I didn't ask who she was texting. I just waited. Like a woman waiting for her own eviction. And still some pathetic part of me hoped I was wrong. Maybe Sophia was just a ghost. Maybe she loved me, truly. Maybe loyalty was enough to bring someone back from the edge, but loyalty is only beautiful when it's mutual. When it isn't, it becomes a quiet place you rot inside. Before she ever loved me, I watched her from the other side of a rain-streaked cafe window, her fingers dancing across a chipped ceramic mug like it held secrets only she could read. Her laugh was light, bell-like, but her eyes always darted. Too quickly, as though afraid to linger in anyone's gaze for too long. There was something broken in the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, a kind of fragility masked as poise. I didn't know her name back then, but I knew her sadness. It wore her like perfume. I saw her there often, same table, Same order, same tired coat with a collar frame, just a little. I never meant to speak to her. I thought she was too luminous for me, like someone who would float away if I reached too fast. But the day I found her crying in the alley behind the cafe, crouched beside a shattered phone screen and shaking hands, I offered her my scarf and a ride home. That was all. Or so I thought. She said her name softly, like it cost her something. She didn't say much else. But 2 days later, she texted me, "Thank you. You were kind when I didn't know how to ask for it." That was the beginning. We started with late night walks and borrowed hoodies. I let her talk about Sophia, the ex who had, in her words, hollowed her out. I held her as she cried, her tears wetting my chest, her voice trembling with all the things she hadn't yet healed. She said she wasn't ready for love, and I nodded. I said I understood, but inside I was already carving out space for her. I was already calling her mine. When she lost her job, I offered her a freelance gig editing design copy for a friend of mine. When rent got hard, I helped. Not because she asked, but because I wanted her to know I could be her safe place. I didn't realize I was slowly folding myself into her needs until I could barely hear my own dot my friends noticed before I did. She still talks to her ex, one said. She disappears for days and only shows up when she needs something, said another. But I defended her like she was a piece of me, fragile, misunderstood, precious. She's just been through a lot, I said. She needs someone patient. No one told me I didn't have to bleed for that patience. She moved in quietly. First a toothbrush, then her favorite mug, a drawer in my dresser. Her playlist replaced mine on the living room speaker. Her shoes lined the hallway. Her laughter filled my quiet kitchen. And then one morning, she called my apartment ours. I smiled like it was a victory. I didn't see it for what it really was, the moment she'd taken ownership of a space she hadn't helped build. I gave her money to start her design studio. She said she needed a fresh start. I wanted to give her that. I paid the lease, bought her a new laptop, even helped paint the walls of the little space downtown. "You believe in me more than anyone else ever has," she whispered, her arms around my neck, her lips against my ear. That should have been enough to fill me. But somewhere deep down, I was already starving. Her mother started calling my phone to ask how she was doing. I answered kindly, updated her, made excuses for her daughter's silences. I wanted to be the person her family respected, the one who held her when she couldn't hold herself. I didn't know then how lonely it would feel to be responsible for someone's life but excluded from their truth. She had a way of making you feel chosen, like you were the only person in the room, until you weren't, and I ignored the moments she went cold. I rationalized the nights she needed space or vanished for creative clarity. I told myself love didn't always look like consistency, that sometimes broken people came back eventually, but more than anything, I wanted to be enough. Enough to make her forget Sophia. Enough to be the name she whispered when she couldn't sleep. Enough to be her last chapter, not just her rebound. I told myself I was healing her, but really I was unbuilding myself. I gave her keys to my apartment. Without realizing I was handing her parts of myself I'd never get back. Every sacrifice felt justified in the moment. A late night ride, an emptied savings account, a quiet swallowed feeling. And when I started noticing that her phone always faced down on the table, or that she turned away when texting, I told myself not to pry. Love, I believed, was trust without conditions, but trust, when unreciprocated, is a blindfold. And I was walking straight into the dark. She thanked me often with gifts, with sweet texts, with nights that felt like we were the only ones in the world. But there was always an aftertaste. Like I was being repaid for something she didn't truly want to owe. Like the love I gave her was a favor she intended to return, just not with her heart. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The over-explained absences, the emotional detachment when she talked about her future, a future where I was always implied but never mentioned. I had woven myself into her life like thread into silk, but I think she always planned to cut me loose. I didn't see it then. I was still busy building her a home, not realizing she was already building an exit. It had been weeks of little things. That's how betrayal always begins, not with shouting matches or slammed doors, but with softness, the kind that makes you doubt yourself. She started apologizing too much for things that didn't need apologies. A spilled glass, a late reply, a distracted glance. She said sorry like punctuation, like armor, like someone trying to stay ahead of a lie. She touched me less, but kissed me more, in public, at least. It was strategic, almost rehearsed, like she was acting out the role of the loving girlfriend instead of living it. Her eyes darted when I asked about her day. Her smile faltered just a breath too soon. She held my hand with fingers that barely curled. I told myself I wouldn't become that person, the one who followed their partner through the city like a ghost of suspicion. But there's a moment when your gut stops whispering and starts howling. And mine had reached a roar I couldn't ignore. So I followed her. It was raining. Of course it was. Isn't it always on nights like this? The kind of rain that makes the world feel cinematic, like heartbreak deserves weather to match. I parked 2 blocks away from the restaurant where she said she was meeting a client. My palms were sweating on the steering wheel. My stomach was a fist. She stood beneath the awning, scrolling through her phone, her hair pulled into a sleek twist. She looked beautiful, untouchable. Her coat, the one I'd bought her for her birthday, clung to her body like it remembered me. And then Sophia arrived. It was her walk. I recognized first, deliberate, self-assured, the way someone moves when they know they're still wanted. She stepped out of the cab like she'd been summoned, like she was coming home to something she had always owned. They didn't hesitate. There was no awkwardness, no tension, just recognition. They embraced. Like they had never stopped. My girlfriend, no, not mine, not anymore, let her hand linger on Sophia's back. She laughed, the real one, the one I hadn't heard in months. And then slowly, gracefully, her fingers reached up and brushed Sophia's cheek. Was the promise ring I gave her, a thin band of gold, simple, quiet, meant to symbolize something patient, something permanent. She had worn it half-heartedly for weeks, sometimes forgetting, sometimes misplacing it. I had even stopped asking. But tonight she wore it. And then they kissed. Not hungry, not stolen, not I missed you frantic. No, it was worse than that. It was practiced, familiar, the kind of kiss people fall back into, not fall into for the first time. It had the rhythm of memory, of ownership, of unfinished business being quietly resumed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or hit the steering wheel like they do in movies. I didn't even look away. I just sat there, soaked in rainlight and silence, watching the woman I built a home with, and built me, brick by quiet brick. When they went inside, I didn't follow. I drove, nowhere at first, just away. The city blurred. Headlights turned into streaks, traffic lights into ghost signals I didn't obey. I took side streets I didn't know, past neighborhoods I had no business being in, until finally, miles later, I pulled into a parking lot behind a rundown motel with a flickering neon vacancy sign and a sagging roof. The room was stale. The sheets were scratchy. I didn't care. I stripped off my wet clothes and sat on the edge of the bed, shaking, the ring still in my pocket. I had tucked it there 2 days ago after she left it by the bathroom sink. She said it slipped off. In the shower, I told her it was okay. I told her I understood. What I didn't say was that I kept it. Not out of anger, but out of fear. Because deep down, I knew it didn't belong on her hand anymore. That night, I wrote her a letter, not to send. I had nothing left to say that she hadn't already ignored. No, I wrote it for me, to remember who I had been, to name what I had lost, not just her, not just us, but the version of myself that believed love alone was enough. I wrote about the first time I saw her laughing in that cafe window, about the scarf I wrapped around her shoulders, a studio I paid for, the nights I stayed awake holding her through dreams about a woman she claimed to be afraid of. I wrote, "You loved me in the way someone loves a life raft, but I wasn't the ocean. I was the land you never planned to reach. I fell asleep with the pen still in my hand, and when the sun broke through the grimy blinds the next morning, something in me cracked open. Not a clean break, more like ice splitting under weight. Painful, uneven, but final dot, she had chosen Sophia. Maybe she never really stopped, but I would choose myself dot, not in some dramatic Instagram quote way, not all at once, but in small, stubborn ways. A cup of tea made just for me, a walk without needing to explain where I was going, a morning without bracing for coldness beside me in bed. I didn't know yet what healing would look like, but I knew it wouldn't look like her, and that was enough for now. I left before she could notice. No goodbye. No note taped to the fridge. No tearful confrontation or cinematic closure. I waited until she was out, probably at the studio, or maybe with Sophia again, slipping wise into her laughter. I packed in silence, folding my clothes with shaky hands, slipping only what I needed into a duffel bag. A few sweaters, my journals, the paintbrushes I'd buried in a drawer long ago. I left behind the ring, placed it carefully on the nightstand. I left the framed photos, the books we bought together, the little ceramic dish where she used to leave her earrings. I even left my favorite gray sweater, the one she always stole when she was cold or wanted to be close. The apartment was quiet. When I shut the door behind me, no one begged me to stay. No one noticed I was gone. I drove for hours, the silence in the car louder than any breakup could ever be. I didn't cry, not yet. I just let the white lines blur into one long ribbon of escape, like I was being pulled somewhere else by something older than fear, the need to breathe without shrinking. Ended up in a small town 3 hours south, a place with more trees than people and a single traffic light that blinked yellow through the night. I found a room above a bookstore run by an elderly woman named Mabel, who didn't ask questions when I stood in her doorway, soaked in exhaustion, asking if the ad was still valid. She didn't offer advice or platitudes, just handed me a key, a wool blanket, and a mug of chamomile tea. "You can pay weekly," she said, "and the cat might sleep on your chest. He's picky." That first week was a blur. I cried in the shower, ate cereal for dinner, took long naps that felt more like collapse than rest. Mabel let me work in the shop, shelving paperbacks, dusting shelves, learning the coffee machine with quiet focus. The customers were kind, mostly regulars. No one knew my name beyond what I offered. No one asked what I had run from. It was peaceful. It was terrifying. The silence pressed in at first, the way pain always does when you finally stop running. I missed the noise, even the bad kind. The sound of her laugh echoing down the hallway, the background hum of her voice on phone calls, the familiar friction of us not quite fitting but still trying. But over time, the quiet became less like a void and more like space, breathing room. A soft distance between me and the woman I used to be. I started journaling again, not the neat, performative kind, but the messy pages that spilled out before I could filter. Scribbled confessions, lists of things I gave up for her. Questions I'd never dared ask. What did love mean if it demanded silence? If it required forgetting yourself? One afternoon, I was painting by the window, abstract swirls of color, and grief when a college-age girl browsing the poetry section came up to the counter. She tilted her head at my smudged hands and said, "Can I ask you something weird?" I nodded, not yet knowing the weight of her question. "Have you ever been in love with the wrong person?" She asked. I laughed, then cried, then nodded again. "Yes," I said softly, and I stayed too long. She didn't press, just smiled as if she understood. And in that small exchange, something stitched inside me, a thread of connection, a reminder that pain doesn't isolate you forever. Every interaction from that point forward became part of the healing. The older man who came in every Friday to order the same coffee and talk about his late wife. The teen who sat on the floor near the fantasy section and asked if dragons ever died of heartbreak. Mabel, who would sometimes bring me ginger cookies and say, "It's quiet tonight. That's a gift, not a curse." I started to believe her. I sold my first canvas a month later. It was a woman's face, not her, but something resembling her. Fractured down the middle, blooming from the cracks. The buyer paid $50 and said, "There's something raw in this." I smiled and said thank you, though what I really meant was, "There's something left in me." I began painting more. Walking longer. Listening to the quiet not as punishment, but as possibility. I read again. Cooked small meals just for myself. Woke up not fearing the day. The bookstore cat, Henry, began sleeping at my feet, then slowly migrated up until he rested on my chest most nights. His purring a heartbeat I could borrow when mine felt tired. One evening, I stood on the roof above the shop, the sunset burning, orange across the sky, and I realized I hadn't thought about her all day. Not her voice, not her perfume, not her absence. She had become a chapter. I had finally stopped rereading. The silence that had once swallowed me had transformed. It wasn't the kind of silence used to manipulate, to withhold affection or truth. It wasn't the silence of suspicion, of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It was mine, earned, chosen, healing. And in that quiet, I began to hear something new. My own voice, unbroken. A year can change the shape of your body, but it changes the shape of your spirit even more. I didn't recognize myself at first, not in the way my jeans fit differently, or how the curve of my shoulders softened without the constant weight of tiptoeing around someone else's emotions. No, it was deeper, quieter, the kind of change you only notice when you realize you're no longer afraid to be alone in a room with your thoughts. The room above. Mabel's bookstore became something more than shelter. It became sacred. It smelled of old pages and lavender. The windows fogged over in winter, and I would paint with wool socks and hot tea, tracing my past in colors I hadn't dared use before. At first, I painted for myself. Then for strangers. I started an anonymous blog called Canvas of Silence, where I posted pieces that ached, women with missing mouths, levers sculpted from glass, a bouquet growing out of a chest wound. Every image held a truth I hadn't spoken aloud. I didn't caption them. I didn't need to, but people understood anyway. The comment sections filled with women who saw themselves in the cracks and shadows. This is what it felt like when she said she loved me but looked away. This one made me cry. Thank you for painting what I couldn't say. You reminded me I'm not crazy. Then the email came from a small gallery downtown. They'd seen my work. They wanted to feature it, a solo show. I stared at the screen for 10 minutes before replying. Yes, I typed. Then sat in silence. As the old me, the one who had always needed permission, finally died. I spent the next 3 months preparing the collection. I titled it Unspoken. Every canvas bled with metaphor. Unworn ring, a woman holding a burning object, looking away as it turned to ash in her hand. 2 voices in one bed, abstract bodies wrapped together but drifting apart, their mouths stitched closed. Inheritance. A young girl offering her heart to an older woman who carves it into a necklace for someone else. Each piece was a confession, but not the kind you beg someone to hear. These were not requests for sympathy. They were acknowledgments. Markers of where I'd been and what I'd survived. I felt powerful. Not because I was healed. Healing isn't linear, but because I no longer needed her to see me. Then the message came. It was from a mutual friend, someone who hadn't reached out in months. She's telling people you abandoned her? That you were possessive, that Sophia saved her from you. For a moment, I froze. My fingers curled around my phone, and I read the words again, just to feel the sting, but it didn't destroy me. Not like before. Activated something. Not rage, not revenge. Something older, more precise. Truth. I opened my laptop. I began collecting everything, screenshots of her messages. The ones where she begged me to stay, promised I was her future. The receipts of every bank transfer I sent when she was struggling. Emails where I helped her apply for loans, pitched her designs, encouraged her when she didn't believe in herself. I compiled them like an artist preparing materials, not for court, not for spectacle, but for clarity. I went back through journals. Read the entries from those nights she didn't come home. The days she said I made her feel small, even as I wrapped the world around her like a gift. I wasn't building a case to ruin her. I was building a mirror, so that if anyone ever asked what happened, I could hold it up and say, here, this is the whole picture. When the gallery asked if I'd like to speak at opening night, I hesitated. The old me would have declined. Would have said the art speaks for itself. But the new me, the woman who had crawled out of silence, who now lived in her own skin with deliberate grace, she said yes. Opening night arrived with rain. Fitting somehow, my paintings lined the walls of the gallery, glowing beneath soft lights. People moved slowly, reverently. A few cried. Some stood still for long minutes in front of Inheritance, lips pressed together like they were keeping their own secrets at bay. I stood in the corner, wearing a dark green suit, my mother's olive leaf necklace resting at my collarbone. I had tucked my hair back, painted my lips the shade of blood roses. I felt solid, like I took up space again. And then I saw her. She walked in with Sophia on her arm. Her hair was longer. Her smile still looked rehearsed. She didn't see me at first. Not until she stood in front of unworn ring. She tilted her head, blinked, and I saw it. That flicker, recognition, realization. Sophia leaned in and whispered something. Her smile faded. That's when they announced me. The crowd turned. I stepped onto the small platform by the front window, heart steady, voice calm. I used to believe that silence was a form of grace. I began. That by not naming the people who broke me, I could somehow stay noble, untouched. But silence, when weaponized by the wrong hands, becomes complicity. The room was quiet. People leaned in. This collection was born from betrayal, from being rewritten by someone who couldn't hold their own truth. These paintings are not accusations. They're not revenge. They are evidence of survival. They are what happens when someone chooses to speak after years of being made to feel unworthy of being heard. I didn't look directly at her, but I didn't have to. My story was never loud, I said, but it was never yours to edit. Applause erupted, gentle at first, then fierce. She disappeared before the end of the night. I never saw her walk out, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the woman who approached me afterward, gray curls, soft eyes, who whispered, I haven't picked up a brush since my divorce, but tomorrow I will. What mattered was the teenage girl who hugged me like I had written her a map. What mattered was me, standing in a room full of truth, knowing I didn't owe anyone a damn thing anymore. I walked home in the rain, alone, free, and that night, For the first time in a long time, I slipped through the silence without needing it to explain itself. The gallery buzzed with warmth and rain-soaked shoes. The air was perfumed with wine and expensive cologne, and chatter rose and fell in curated bursts. I stood in the wings, unseen, watching strangers trace their fingers through the air in front of my canvases, mouths parted, breath held. The collection had no names posted on the walls, just brushstrokes and pain, texture and survival. Then she arrived, late of course, always on her own schedule. The room tilted as her heels clicked across polished floors. Her hair was styled like it used to be on the nights she needed to win a room, soft waves, effortlessly perfect. She wore dark red lipstick, the same shade I once smeared on the back of her neck in the kitchen of our apartment. And on her arm was Sophia, of course. She didn't see me at first. Not in the crowd, not among the art, but I saw her pause in front of a painting titled "The Back Door Wasn't Locked. You Just Never Knocked." I watched her head tilt, eyes narrow. Something in her spine straightened. She recognized the shape of the apartment door, the coffee mug on the floor, the shoes hers pointing in opposite directions like they had somewhere better to be. She didn't know I was the featured artist. Not yet. Not until the lights dimmed. Not until the host stepped onto the small stage at the front of the gallery and said, "Our final speaker tonight, the woman whose work you've all been feeling rather than viewing, please welcome the artist behind Unspoken." I stepped out. Black silk, bare neckline except for a single olive leaf necklace, the one my mother gave me. It was a symbol of peace in the history books. In my family, it meant war was over, but the ground was still sacred. She saw me now. Her face froze, not shocked, exposed. Sophia turned to her, whispered something. Her arm slipped away from hers. I stood at the mic. The lights made it hard to see individual faces, which helped. "I didn't name the paintings," I began, "because naming something sometimes cages it. These works are memories. Not accusations, not fiction. Just the honest residue of a woman who stayed too long, loved too hard, and finally left." A hush fell. I pulled a folded page from my coat pocket. "This is from a journal entry dated June 9th, 2 years ago." My voice was calm, steady. "I wait by the door again tonight." Her texts are short, clipped. The word "sorry" doesn't appear, not even once. I eat alone. She calls later, says she fell asleep at Sophia's. They were just editing. She doesn't ask what I did today. She says I'm too sensitive when I sigh. I paused, folded the paper, let the silence sit. "Art doesn't lie," I said, "even when people do." I looked up. Being erased by someone you love doesn't feel like a knife. It feels like fog, like questioning your own memory until you can't tell if you're broken or just inconvenient. My hands didn't tremble, my breath didn't hitch. I was told I was controlling because I asked for accountability, because I noticed the phone always face down, because I asked why our weekends always seemed to shrink when someone else called. No names, but every word carried her fingerprint. The room was completely silent, eyes glassy, mouths tight. Every breath shared. "I painted these pieces not to destroy anyone," I said, "but to stop destroying myself." I ended with a bow of the head. Applause broke like a wave, loud. Real. Some stood, others wiped their eyes. One woman in a green wool coat mouthed, "Thank you." But she didn't move. My ex stood by the far wall, jaw clenched, hands stiff at her sides. Sophia had already stepped away, talking to a friend, sipping wine, pretending not to notice. Classic Sophia. I walked off stage. 15 minutes passed. Then I stepped outside to breathe. Cool air, faint drizzle, the scent of damp concrete and spring. She followed me. "You..." Her voice cracked. You turned me into a villain. I didn't flinch. I looked her straight in the eyes, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I wasn't smaller than her shadow. No, I said gently. You did that. I just painted the scene. Her mouth parted. She searched my face, but found nothing left to push or pull. I had nothing left to give. You didn't even use my name. I didn't have to. She blinked. Maybe she expected tears, a hug, an apology, anything to let her believe she still mattered in the story she lost control of. But I offered nothing, just the truth. You always said I was too dramatic, I said. Too emotional, too much. And yet, the moment I say something, with art, with grace, suddenly I'm the problem again. She shook her head, barely. I loved you. No, you loved what I gave you. My attention. My softness, my silence. She stepped forward, but I stepped back. You don't get to rewrite me anymore, I said. You don't get to twist the narrative to save face. She looked away, then asked, voice barely audible, was I that bad? I smiled, not cruelly, just finally free. You were careless, I said, and I was careful with you. The cab pulled up beside me. Right on time, I opened the door. This is how loyal lesbians heal, I said. Not with rage, not with rumors, but with silence, and then with a voice. I stepped inside. She didn't follow. As the gallery faded in the rearview mirror, its golden lights shrinking behind rain-blurred windows, I whispered something to myself, a name, my own. Because for the first time in years, I remembered how it sounded when no one else tried to speak over it.